achieved.
And the saga continues with Conor McGregor and where we expect to see him competing next, if at all. He would be fully within his rights to say, I just made a shit ton of money and I am walking away from combat sports altogether. I will go off, enjoy this money, make wealth in other ways, invest it, whatever he needs to do, capitalize on his popularity to the utmost and make cash. But at the same time, we currently have a whole plethora of rumors rumbling around as to who he might fight next. Whether it be Khabib Nurmagomedov, could it be the winner of Tony Ferguson, Kevin Lee, possibly Canelo Alvarez in another boxing match. If I had to say, I would say you did the boxing thing, you lost to Floyd Mayweather. No harm in that. You made a ton of bank. Go back to the UFC, defend your lightweight title. There's a number of very interesting, very exciting fights that can be had and will take place inside the octagon. As a mixed martial arts fan, looking at Conor McGregor as a fighter who came from that background, that's where I want to see him competing. I want to see him go out and defend his lightweight title. I want to see him take on, a variety of opponents, whether it be Tony Ferguson, Kevin Lee, Nurmagomedov, Rafael dos Anjos, whatever. Go up and fight Tyrone Woodley at welterweight. I'd even be in favor of that at some point. But I want to see him back in the octagon. That's where I'm hoping to see him compete next, but we'll have to wait and see. Now, as far as competing is concerned, I had another opportunity to go out and audit, if you will, another jiu-jitsu class. I very much want to start training, start rolling, start just getting involved. But again, I stated several times to my friend and in general, I just have a lot of shit on my plate right now that I just can't do it. And once I have the time to invest, and I'm in, I'm gonna probably go for it. But very interesting. When I went up to check out this class, I walked in, I heard everybody talking, and it was, very calm, very relaxed. The instructor was, I believe when I walked in, was drilling. I don't know what they were drilling. Eventually they drilled a variety of different holds, including triangle and omoplatas. And, I got to see that. But initially I heard them talking, I saw the number of people, and then there weren't a ton, but it was enough, more than last time. And I just had this overwhelming feeling that I wanted to leave. And it was kind of weird. I haven't had that in a long time. And I came to the realization that when I walked all the way back down to my vehicle, I found myself in my vehicle before I even knew what I was doing, that this is kind of frightening. Because at this point in my life, I have everything I've done, I have a background in, I have experience in. This would be a venture in which I'm starting from scratch, essentially, and I'm going to get absolutely smashed for a long time until I get to the point where I'm better, or I quit, one of the two. And at that point, I decided, I'm going to go back up, I'm going to watch and check it out, see what's going on, and it was quite cool. When I got back up there, I was relieved that I came back. The atmosphere was very welcoming, people very friendly, both, just, hey, how's it going? To me, and amongst each other, very relaxed, very cool, training, drilling. I really liked watching the techniques. The instructor was fantastic. Just going over some of the things, it was very cool to see, and it's again something I very much want to be a part of. And it was funny because my friend who was up there came over and said, you look angry, you look pissed off, what's going on? Because I'm sitting in the corner on the mats. I said, no, this is my studying phase. This is what I'm focused. I am watching step by step how to do a triangle. Most of the steps I know, a couple of things I'm like, oh, that's very interesting how he integrated that in there. But I just really enjoyed it again. And I'm going, yeah, I think this is something I want to do. I want to at least give a shot at it, because the way I look at life in general, and that's kind of how this whole mixed martial arts podcast started, is if you don't take your shot at something, then you'll never know how it turns out. If you do take an opportunity and you make the best of it, it might fail, it might fall flat on its face, but at least you tried and okay, that wasn't for me, time to move on. Speaking of moving on, let's take a look at the upcoming UFC Fight Night 117, which will take place on September 23rd from Saitama, Japan, featuring 6 main card fights, which I will give you all of my predictions for, all of my preliminary picks, as is always the case, at kamikazeoverdrive.net, so please check them out. I think there's 5 prelims on this card. My bet packs didn't do very shit hot last show. There were a couple of upsets where we really came out of left field, unfortunately, and that kind of derailed us quickly. We'll hopefully get back on track. Again, UFC Fight Night 115, the best card of the year as far as our financial gains were concerned, so we'll hopefully get back to that. Maybe not that level, but certainly we'll try our best to get in there. So I'm certainly going... I like the predictions I've made here so far. There's some pretty interesting fights in this card, and it's a pretty long intro, so let's get to that first main card prediction. Fight number 1 on the main card takes place in the UFC's featherweight division as Mizuto Pugnas Hirota, 19 wins, 8 losses, and 2 draws, takes on Boston Strong, my boy, Charles Rosa, with a current record of 11 wins and 3 defeats. Now, Hirota's coming off a very tough loss to Volkanovski in a very gritty and entertaining fight, which for the most part he got wiped out in, but he had his moments. He was undefeated in his last 5 fights prior to the defeat. For Rosa, he was stopped by Shane Burgos the first time he's ever been knocked out in his career. He has alternated wins and losses over his last 6 appearances. Now, looking at Rosa, he is 2 inches taller. The American has a 2-inch reach advantage as well, and he is the younger fighter by 5 years. Now, Hirota is a striking-based fighter. He does have some power, although most of his knockout wins came from earlier in his career. 10 wins by knockout overall. He is 8-7 on the scorecards, which gives you an indication maybe some of the issues he has with volume. He shows good head movement overall. Enters and exits at different angles has looked much better with his offensive striking of late. You look for him to use a jab to enter that pocket and land combinations. But offensively, 3.42 strikes landed per minute versus 3.67 strikes absorbed per minute. He did put up 102 in his UFC best performance, but you can see his offensive output tends to not match what he takes in return. He throws a good left hand. He'll mix in a short right hand as well. He'll throw a leaping right punch to the body. He likes to attack the body to force his opponents to drop his hands. That opens up options to the head. He'll work in some low kicks where necessary. He throws a nice 2-punch combination, and he will routinely do that, especially more recent action against Cole Miller. He'll do that to set up a body lock takedown. Once on the ground, solid ground and pound. He will score takedowns to try to throw his opponent's rhythm off, but at the same time, that has been a big Achilles heel of Pugnas's. He has given up takedowns in 11 takedowns in total, actually, in his 3 UFC losses. Conversely, he landed 8 in his 1-0-1, he landed 8 in his 1-0-1 span. Volkanovski took him down 4 times. It's been an issue for him giving up takedowns and spending too much time on his back. When he fought Miller, he landed the majority of the takedowns, but lost a couple of scrambles and exchanges, spent some time on his back, got back up, but still, you can see one major area of vulnerability for the Japanese fighter. You know, it's a new important element that he's mixed in with his wrestling, but at the same time, you know, he has to find that balance between offensive striking, holding the defensive front, and changing levels for takedowns. Now, for Rosa, he's a BJJ black belt, 7 wins by submission. He has a nice variety of sub techniques on his record. He can attack from top position or bottom position. Obviously, he wants to be on top because that's where, in mixed martial arts, that's where you are scoring points and having the most success. He has solid takedown numbers overall, 14 takedowns over his last 5 fights. He has put up decent numbers in both wins and losses, which is concerning because it tells me that, yeah, he can put up takedowns and victories. He'll put up takedowns and losses, but he's not doing enough with the position, and that certainly is an issue. You know, his striking is decent. He will switch stances. He relies heavily on a kicking attack. You know, lots of front leg techniques, low kicks, turning side kicks. He'll mix in a left jab. His overhand right tends to be a little bit wide. He kind of wings it. You know, I don't like the way he throws it. And in his last fight, and I know Burgos for the most part is fairly quick, I thought Rosa looked a little bit sluggish, a little bit slow with his offense, and was really struggling to find much consistency. Now, as far as his output is concerned, he's actually done a nice job of picking up the pace. Through his first 3 UFC fights, his opponent outlanded him in all 3 affairs. But over his last 2 appearances, he actually has got the better of his opponents, including the Burgos fight. He landed 92 in his 1 fight prior, 86 in his most recent appearance. So those are some pretty decent offensive numbers. Now, Hirota's fighting at home. There's the no east to west travel factor, which could give him a nice edge and in both cardio and just overall comfort level. You know, Rosa, when you look at him, he's lost to some solid talent, and but his ability to land takedowns has been consistent throughout, as I said, both in wins and losses, which is encouraging and discouraging at the same time, if that's possible. You know, Hirota, overall, he has struggled when his opponents can take him down. It creates offensive gaps that he's unable to close with his striking. He just doesn't put up the numbers to get back in the fight. You know, Rosa needs to use those kicks to keep Hirota on the outside, then mix in the takedowns once Mizuto moves forward and looks to put him on his back. The hometown decision is certainly a concern when fighting in Japan, but I think Hirota has struggled to get wins in the UFC overall. His offensive output just isn't there, and his defensive game has enough issues that opponents can take advantage of it. Rosa has the tools to continue those issues, and my prediction is Charles Rosa to defeat Mizuto Hirota by decision. Sticking with the 145-pounders, we move next to a very interesting fight as Teruto Ishihara, the opponent of Mizuto Hirota in the Road to Japan tournament final, which ended in a draw, comes in with a record of 10 wins, 4 losses, and 2 draws, and he takes on Rolando D, currently holding a record of 8 wins, 5 losses, 1 draw, and a single no contest. Now, Ishihara has lost back-to-back decisions to a pair of very flawed fighters, but simply fighters that got the better of him in Artem Lobov and former lightweight title challenger Gray Maynard. He did start his UFC run 2 wins, no losses, and a draw, certainly needing to get back in the win column here. Now for D, he made his debut at UFC Fight Night 111, lost via TKO to Alex Caceres, coming due to an eye injury. They stopped the fight after 2 rounds. D is 1 inch taller. He'll have the same reach as Ishihara. The Japanese fighter is the younger man by a single year. Now looking at D first, he has 2 wins by knockout, 2 submission victories, and a 4-3 record on the scorecards. 1 loss each by knockout and submission. He's a Muay Thai-based striker. He throws a solid left hook. He will throw in flurries. He, as not surprisingly coming from his background, he has some very hard kicks. He'll attack low. He'll go to the body. He'll go to the head. He needs to set them up a little bit better, disguise them maybe with a jab first. There's just throwing those naked kicks, that naked offense is going to have very limited success. I expect to see a little bit better out of him in this fight. You know, when he fought Alex Caceres in his last fight, he was getting tagged with some big shots from Caceres. When he got backed up to the cage, which happened way too often, he was getting hurt, he was getting dropped, and he just had nowhere to go and no answer for Caceres moving forward. When he is pushing the pace, he tends to plod forward a little bit too much. Not a lot of movement on the feet. He's very hittable as a result, even when he's engaging. As far as his ground game, we haven't seen a heck of a lot of that in the UFC. Obviously, only 1 fight that lasted 10 minutes total. Not a major threat on the ground. He did shoot in Caceres once and struck and didn't with pretty much no success. He did take Caceres' back later in the fight, but again, minimal success in that position. Looking at Ishihara, he has 8 wins by knockouts. That's pretty good sizable numbers there. Conversely, he is 1-3 in fights ended by decision, including 2 consecutive losses on the scorecards. The major concerns with Ishihara has been his cardio and his takedown defense. Maynard just ground him down. He took him out 11 times and just took him out of the fight with his wrestling, which was certainly a threat. Ishihara unable to exploit the chin that everybody was concerned with Gray Maynard. Additionally, Ishihara has a tendency to slow down as the fight progresses into the second half. He does a lot of movement. He has, very active, very live fighter, but he simply has issues carrying it on into the second half. Now, you'd think training with Team Alpha Male, who are just a bunch of beasts, that would improve those areas, improve his conditioning, improve his counter wrestling. It still could, and we could see that progress as he gets going, but certainly those last 2 fights against Maynard and Lobov, unsuccessful, and those 2 factors certainly played a role. When he fought Lobov, he had a lot of pressure with, a lot of issues with the pressure of Lobov and the counter striking. Every time Ishihara pushed forward, it seemed like Artem had an answer and was cracking him, and at times Teruto seemed very hesitant to engage. Now, when he does engage, he has big power, especially from the left side. He can counter while moving backwards, which is a very effective technique. He does a good job for the most part of slipping his head off and throwing some, off the center line and throwing some very hard leg kicks when needed. And if you're going to do that, if you're going to throw those naked leg kicks, you need to make sure your head's not stationary and not there to be countered. Against D, he should be the rangier fighter. That should allow him to get in, land his strikes. He cannot allow D to close that gap and just cut off the cage and wail away. I don't see D being a takedown threat. I don't see him carrying the type of pace that's going to give Ishihara issues. Ishihara should be the type of guy who's able to control the pace of this fight. I think this is a matchup where we're seeing a showcase of a local talent at home in Japan. D is still unproven at this level, and as I said, lacks the intangibles that will give Ishihara issues. I think he should be able to defend any of those takedowns that come his way. And again, he should be able to land at will against a relatively stationary opponent who's going to want to stay striking. And my prediction is Teruto Ishihara to defeat Rolando D by knockout. Our next fight stands to be one of the most interesting matchups probably the most interesting matchup in the card because of who is competing. In the UFC's light heavyweight division, Henrique Frankenstein da Silva, 12 wins, 3 losses, and no draws, takes on the UFC debutante Gokhan the Rebel Saki, currently coming with a UFC record of 0 wins and 1 loss. Wow, that's not impressive. That's the exact same record Conor McGregor has as a professional boxer, but that fight for Saki took place all the way back in 2004. It was a TKO defeat. He is an elite level kickboxer comprising a record of 83 wins and 12 losses, 1 no contest. And He's coming to the UFC with a lot of hype, a lot of expectations, but we'll get to that momentarily. De Silva has lost 3 consecutive fights heading into this matchup. He started his UFC run 2-0 and had a lot of people who were really interested in him. He's currently sliding and could very well slide right out of the promotion. He is coming off the first knockout loss of his career. Physically, De Silva 3 inches taller, he'll have a 3-inch reach advantage, and he is the younger man by 6 years. The Brazilian overall, 11 wins by knockout, 1-1 fights ended by submission, 0-1 in fights ended by decision. So you certainly see those numbers there, and you can kind of see he's this live by the sword, die by the sword type of competitor. He is coming off the first knockout loss of his career, which is certainly concerning. For Saki, he is an elite level kickboxer. As I mentioned, he has wins over Tyrone Spong, Daniel Guita, Ray Sefo. He also has been in there with guys like Badahari and Alistair Overeem, losing both of those fights. He's a Glory heavyweight champion, 2014 light heavyweight tournament winner. He last competed in 2015, which is certainly something he talked about. He said he accomplished everything he needed to accomplish in the sport of kickboxing and is looking to move on to something else, and that something else is mixed martial arts. Now, when you watch his... I didn't go back and watch the 2004 fight. What's the point? It's a long time ago. When you watch him compete as a striker, he throws some exceptionally hard low kicks. Again, it's kickboxing. That's what they do. Look for him to throw a right kick to the body as well, push kick down the middle. He'll make some spinning attacks as well, not afraid to go to the head. A lot of his punching offense comes from the left side. He throws a left hook to the head and to the body. He'll mix an uppercut as well. He'll double up his offense on that left side. Very quick, very nasty with lots of power. I like the way he steps off the side when throwing to avoid getting countered. That's something I want to see him do a lot of here in the UFC. Some of the questions, though, how does the smaller gloves impact him? You know, we've seen a lot of guys like Alistair Overeem, a lot of guys transition to mixed martial arts, or at least go back and forth. Do we see issues where, defensively those gloves aren't there to cover up as much as they need? Is that going to be an issue? How will his takedown defense hold up? That's a massive issue. Whenever you see someone coming over from a different discipline like kickboxing, like boxing, if an opponent looks to put them on the mat, can they defend it? If they get taken down, is the fight over? If they get put on the mat, are they stuck there? We certainly saw James Toney, not the same situation though. James Toney, as soon as he was taken down, it was lights out. We'll see if Saki can have any different success there. Either way, you look at what he has potential to make a sizable impact in a division that certainly needs it, or he could fizzle out after a couple of fights and kind of be an afterthought. I don't remember when this kickboxer came over and did that. It was very unsuccessful. Now, looking at Silva, he is a very wild, aggressive, and at times sloppy striker. He takes a lot of damage in the process of attacking, but he keeps moving forward. He's a bit of a slow starter at times, and he tends to capitalize more when his opponents start to slow down, and then he picks up the pace and gets going. When he fought Wilson a couple fights back, he was getting blasted early on with combinations and struggling there. His guard tends to be a little bit open. He will cover up and take punches to land punches, but again, it's a concernable way of doing things, especially against more technical strikers who tend to have an advantage over him. And it's just, again, do they slow down? Yes, then he can get back in the fight. Do they not? Well, then he's in some serious trouble. He tends to be a little bit flat-footed at times. He'll push forward and attack when his opponent's on the backtrack. That's when he does his best work. He throws a decent left jab. Again, his punches tend to be very wide-ranging, which leaves him open down the middle. His guard is open where he can be countered. He has been dropped multiple times despite having a pretty decent chin. He'll throw some decent body kicks. He'll work in some knees as well. He got absolutely destroyed by Kutalaba, knocked down, and eventually finished on the mat. That's also been an area of concern for him, but it shouldn't be in this fight as far as his takedown defense. If he can submit. He has one submission. He's got a crafty little submission game. We've seen him attack with a couple of things, but I would think it's been minimal focus. His takedown game has been minimal focus of his offense in his UFC run. He did submit Christensen, but that might be his route here. Look for takedowns, push Saki into the cage, try and really shut down any his striking technique, tire him out, get him on the mat, and go to work. Overall, Gokhan Saki is the far superior striker. He should find success against that lax D of De Silva and his willingness to walk forward and absorb strikes. There are still areas of vulnerability that the kickboxer certainly could have exploited, and it wouldn't shock me to see him get put on the mat and finished. But I think that slow start for De Silva and his willingness to engage is going to simply cost him significantly against a very talented, very dangerous kickboxer. My prediction is Gokhan Saki to defeat Henrique De Silva by knockout. Fight number 4 in the main card takes place in the UFC's lightweight division as Japanese fighting legend Takanori, the Fireball Kid Gomi, fighting with a record of 35 wins, 13 losses, and 1 no contest, takes on South Korea's Dong-Hyun Kim, not the stun gun, but the maestro, currently holding a record of 14 wins, 8 defeats, and 3 draws. Now, Gomi is coming off his 4th consecutive loss, and has just a single win in his last 6 appearances. He has been finished in 4 straight fights, all in the opening round. There's a very, very good chance that this could be his retirement fight, getting an opportunity to fight one more time at home before walking away, or at least leaving the UFC. I can't imagine a 5th straight loss would not get him his walking papers if he did opt to continue. Kim is coming off a win over Brendan O'Reilly. He had lost back-to-back fights, both by knockout, to begin his UFC career. They were very good fights. They were very entertaining fights, but unfortunately he got the wrong end of both of them. Physically, the Korean fighter, 4 inches taller, they'll have the same reach, and Kim is the younger man by a significant 10 years. Now, Gomi throws heat. We know what he's all about, but his best days are clearly behind him. It's very evident that that's the case here. 13 wins by knockout, 16 and 3 in fights ended by decision, which is a notable record. But he has 10 combined submission and knockout defeats. The finishes are starting to pile up on his record. This is actually the first time he's fought twice in a year since 2014, and more concerning, this is the last time he actually knocked out an opponent. Came all the way back in 2012 at UFC 144. So he has had some issues finding his mark with what he does best. Now, he's a very unorthodox striker when he does get his offense going. That odd style and cadence can create issues for his opponents, and before you know it, boom, they're landing that big, power strike that puts them down. In his last couple of fights, though, he's been simply, as I said, he's been run over in one-sided fights. You look at the offensive output he's put up. In his last 4 fights, he's landed 1 significant strike, 7 significant strikes, 1 significant strike, and 0 in his last fight. That's not enough to win a fight. That's not enough to win anything. Oh, well, I guess it could if you really make that one count. But unfortunately, it's just not enough for him. Gomi, he's been getting smashed on the mat in each of those last 4 defeats. Dealing with takedowns has been a constant issue of his career, but now it seems like once he hits the mat, the fight is over. He has no defense. He is stuck. I don't want to say a legend like him quits, but it would appear he just quits and it's done. Looking at Kim, 5 wins by knockout, 6 submission victories, 3 and 4 on the scorecards. He has been stopped twice each by submission and knockout. So he's also been stopped on a couple of occasions. He is very aggressive. He's a kill or be killed type fighter. He landed 83 strikes in his loss to Marco Polo Reyes. He hurt him a couple of times. He hit him very hard, but he couldn't get the finish, and eventually was finished himself. He likes to stand in the pocket and trade. He did have issues with the physicality of Dominic Steele at welterweight. Again, that shouldn't be an issue here. Steele being a very strong, very physical 170-pounder, so Kim shouldn't have any issues here, where he has fought at lightweight pretty much all of his career. Against Brendan O'Reilly, he looked much more composed. He relied more on his judo base to work in the clinch, land takedowns, and really grind that fight out, limit the damage he took, and get the better of it. A very technical approach, which I very much like to see. He landed 4 takedowns in that fight. He advanced position quite frequently. He wasn't perfect positionally by any stretch of the imagination. He gave up a couple of spots, got put on his back a couple of times, but he held the majority of the top control, did more damage, and won the fight as a result. Ultimately, we've seen it takes a heck of a lot to get Kim out of a fight. Both Steele and Reyes had to go to war with him to finish him, and they could not do it early on. It took a long time to put him away. I don't think Gomi can land enough over a prolonged period of time to get the finish. He has that one hitter-quitter power, but he's struggling to land it, and Kim, he's got a pretty decent chin on him. I'm not saying he couldn't go down. I'm just saying the likelihood of it happening is pretty minimal. Kim needs to follow the blueprint laid out for him by previous opponents. Takedowns, control the position, and either open up with ground and pound or hunt for that submission, or a combination of the both. Gomi probably is going to retire, I would think, after this fight. Win, lose, or draw at home, he might as well. Kim needs to be careful not to get drawn into a striking war, which opens up the opportunity for Gomi to crack him. Kim could probably still win a striking-based fight, but again, he needs to fight to his strengths and Gomi's weaknesses. And my prediction is Dong Hyun Kim to defeat Takanori Gomi by TKO. Maybe I spoke too soon as far as what the most interesting fight in this card could be, as this fight certainly is in the running for that as well. In the co-main event of the evening, we move to the women's strawweight division as a pair of Brazilian monsters go head-to-head as the number 1 ranked and one-time title challenger Claudia Gadelha, 15-2-0, takes on the also former title challenger and number 4th ranked Jessica Andrade, currently holding a record of 16 wins and 6 defeats. Now, as I said, a battle of former title challengers. They are combined 0-3 against the current champion, Joanna Champion, if you will, Jędrzejczyk. Gadelha overall, if you rate their performances, she fought once before actually fighting for the title. A split decision loss over 3 rounds. She had the better performances in her 2 appearances than Andrade did in her 1 appearance. Just in my opinion, I think most people would agree with me in there. Andrade is coming off a title fight loss, so there is the possibility for a post-title fight letdown. She had been 3-0 at strawweight prior to tangling with the reigning champion. Gadelha has won back-to-back fights since her title fight loss. She submitted Karolina Kowalkiewicz, which was incredibly impressive. She is 4-2 at strawweight with both of her losses in the UFC. 4-2 in the UFC, with both of her losses coming against the current the baddest chick on the planet, potentially. I think so, Yanni and Jacek. For Gadelha, she is 5'4". That still puts her 3 inches taller than Jessica Andrade. That shows how small Andrade is. And again, I say this every time, and most people talk about it. It's unbelievable. She was fighting at bantamweight at 5'1" and having success. Gadelha will have a 1-inch reach advantage. Andrade is the younger fighter by 3 years. Now, looking at Claudia first, she is a BJJ black belt, 2 wins by knockout, 7 submission victories, 6-2 on the scorecards. Conversely, Andrade, a BJJ purple belt, 5 wins by knockout, 7 submission wins as well, 4-2 on the scorecards. She has been finished twice each by knockout and submission. For Gadelha, she is an absolute monster on the floor. And she's improving her striking, looking to round out her game. For Andrade, she is an absolute monster on the feet, and she has a solid ground game to back it up. You know, when you look at Claudia first, when she's striking, she likes to close the distance behind her punches. She tends to come in a little bit high. She needs to get a little bit lower, but she's closing the distance behind those punches and looking to tie up. Once she ties up, she'll push her opponent into the cage, and she establishes double underhooks, her best technique for takedowns, establish double underhooks and really twist them away from the cage, control that body, and drag them down. Her top position strikes are kind of mixed. She seems like she really wants to cement that position and start advancing before she actually worries about doing too much damage. She has a tendency to expend a little bit too much energy when she is engaging. You look at her numbers so far, she has the best takedown numbers in the division, 27 combined takedowns over her UFC run, 6 fights, I believe it is. When she got Kovacevic on the ground, she took her down and locked in that, jumped to her back and locked in that rear naked choke with relative ease, picking up the win by rear naked choke. Overall, though, most of her submission victories, I think almost all of her submission victories outside of that last fight have come by armbar. Now, for Claudia, she has some power when she strikes, but she still has a tendency to force her strikes. Again, I would expect her to improve again heading into this fight, but she still tends to be a little bit stiff, throws some single strikes. She's showing improvements. The time away should lead to another leap in overall skill set. When she fought Jessica Aguilar, she was landing some decent flurries. She was working a tie clinch with some knees, which I like to see as well. And she dropped Joanna with a couple of big straight lefts as well in that fight. And again, going back to the Aguilar fight, she landed 117 significant strikes. That's a pretty good number for a fighter known for her grappling. One of the things I saw on the vertical exchanges against Kovacevic was that she was landing some nice short offense on the break. She'd close in and then boom, as they're separating, elbow, short punches, and really cracking her with some of those quick techniques. Looking at Andrade, she is an absolute animal on the feet. Pace and power, overwhelming opponents, backing them up to the cage and just letting it go. Lots of hooks. She will go to the body. She can counter strike. She swings wider at range. She's far more effective when she gets in close. She'll work those hard short punches. She'll work in knees. She had against Jojo Calderwood, she had a lot of success closing that gap early and really dominated her, taking her down with ease from the clinch and eventually finishing that fight on the mat via submission. Once she does hit the ground, she is a very capable ground fighter. She can scramble. She's very strong. Look for that guillotine. That's her signature move. I don't expect her to submit Claudia Gadelha, but still it's something that she will threaten with. Maybe it'll help her get back up. Big slams against JoJo. Again, ground and pound, she'll again do damage and look to soften up for that submission opportunity. At the same time, when she fought Marion Renault, she got caught off her back and submitted. She got submitted by Raquel Pennington as well in the rematch. You know, and those are things against a person like Gadelha. You give her a position to finish, she will finish you on the mat. Andrade overall has looked very good at 115 pounds. Her cardio held up well against Penne over an 8-minute beating. She slowed a little bit versus Hill, but she was still very effective over that fight. Against in her last fight against Joanna Jędrzejczyk, she struggled to track her down, but she was still engaging. She was still attacking. She landed 83 significant strikes against the champ. That's the second most that Joanna has been hit in her UFC career. So that's certainly worth noting for Andrade. I think overall, when you look at this, Andrade, she has a significant sizable advantage. Yeah, it's double that works there in strikes landed per minute. And I think that's going to make it difficult for Claudia, and she's going to make it very difficult for Claudia Gadelha to take her down, because once she moves into range to score takedowns, Andrade is going to counter the hell out of her and just land those massive, massive bombs. I think Andrade is going to punish Claudia anytime she gets in close. She's going to go to the body, maybe test that cardio a little bit, and she's going to keep engaging. She's going to work that volume attack. You know, Angela Hill and the champ had a lot of success avoiding engaging, and then doing, you know, that avoiding the damage that Claudia can unleash by moving and sticking and not being stationary target. That's not Claudia Gadelha's game. She knows only one way to fight, and that's move forward, and I think that's going to cost her against the heavier hitter. So my prediction is Jessica Andrade to defeat Claudia Gadelha. I think she actually gets her out of there. I think she wins by knockout. So I'll take Andrade by knockout. Finally, we move on to the main event of the evening. And I mean finally, because wow, it is getting late. I have to get up to go to work in like 15 minutes. I exaggerate, but not that much. Our main event of the evening takes place in the UFC's light heavyweight division, and it's a short notice affected fight as the number 6th ranked fighter, Strikeforce alumni Ovince St. Preux, 20 wins and 10 losses, takes on the returning former UFC middleweight title challenger Yushin Thunder Okami, currently holding a record of 32 wins and 8 losses. Now, Shogun was supposed to go run it back with OSP. Obviously, Shogun knocked out in their first encounter in Brazil. He pulled out basically a week before the fight. Yushin Okami is stepping in on a week's notice to take on St. Preux. Okami's was actually prepping for a middleweight fight, but he said he had an opportunity to get back into the UFC, so he absolutely jumped at that chance, and here he is. For OSP, he's coming off a submission victory over Rodrigo de Lima. He had lost 3 consecutive fights, and he is 2-4 over his last 6 contests, including 2 losses by finish. Physically, he is the taller man by an inch. He'll have a sizable 8-inch reach advantage, and he is younger than Okami by 2 years. And it's worth noting Yushin Okami has been fighting recently at welterweight during his time in the World Series of Fighting in the Professional Fight League. He's been competing at 170 pounds. Now, Okami had won 3 consecutive fights before his TKO loss to Jacare Souza sent him packing from the UFC, and he considered other guys like Takanori Gomi, who's on a 4-fight losing streak, I said, that he's still in the promotion. So it's very interesting to see Okami pushed out. A lot of people saying just not an exciting fighter, not a good fit for the division, but here he's back. Outside of the UFC, he went 5-2. He had a TKO loss to David Branch, who we just saw fight in the UFC in the main event, and he had a decision loss fighting at 170 pounds against our good friend John Fitch. Looking at Okami first, he's not an overwhelming striker. He averages 2.23 strikes landed per minute. Again, this is back UFC stats when he fought at middleweight, compared to 2.2 strikes absorbed per minute. So that's very interesting. Just pretty much on par. Averages 1.88 takedowns at an 84%, and an 84% takedown defense. So you can see where his offense isn't overwhelming. He has 11 wins by knockout, 5 losses by knockout, so those numbers started to pile up, and he has 16-5 in fights ended by decision. Now, what he tends to do, he paws with his right hand when he's engaging. He'll throw that as a jab as well, and he'll follow with a right hook, and he'll have a right hook which he will lead with as well. When he fought Bradley in Paul Bradley, one of his most recent World Series of Fighting appearances, he was taken down on a couple of occasions. He had issues creating separation whenever Bradley pressed him into the cage, and certainly that is concerning against a big man like Ovince St. Preux. When you look at Okami's pattern, in his victories, he has landed takedowns. The strike exchanges are fairly close. He tends to grind out victories with a mix again of top position control, some decent outputs, maybe some ground and pound, and just defensively being sound and limiting what his opponent's able to do to him. In his losses, he lands minimal to no takedowns. He gets outstruck on the feet and potentially can be taken down, in the fight on a couple of occasions. Big questions for Okami. How does that short notice affect him? He's returning to the UFC, a lot of pressure. He is fighting at home, which is fantastic. He's also moving up to light heavyweight. He's a big middleweight. But he's also a big middleweight that was able to come down to welterweight. What is it going to do to see him up at 100 or 205? I would have guessed he comes in around 203 is my prediction for this fight. Now looking at OSP, he's a very good athlete. He's shown signs of skill, but he's still incredibly raw, and I think at this point in his career, he's going to remain raw. Cardio's been a big issue. It's preventing that next step as he just seems to not be able to carry his offense into deeper fights, more demanding fights. His striking is dangerous. He throws very hard, but he throws single strikes. He throws good kicks. That front kick and back left leg body kick are very dangerous, very good kicks. He throws a nice straight left. He'll work a left jab as well. He'll work in some knees to the body if the opportunity presents itself. He has power. He can counter-strike. He took out Shogun with a counter-strike. He landed a counter left hand against Patrick Cummins as well as he moved in and knocked him out. OSP likes to try and fight a relaxed style. It helps to try and keep his cardio in check, but it keeps his hands low. His chin tends to go up a little bit. His guard is open, and he still tends to slow down. He needs to avoid running forward and overextending when he attacks. He does have that issue as well where he just tries to launch himself in, and a good counter-striker will slip off to the side and land something with significance. When he fought Manoa, he had a lot of success pressuring Manoa early, but once Jimmy started firing back, that's where he had issues. He slowed down in round 2, his defense started to lapse, and he was backpedaling. He got finished. Against Volkan Ozdemir, who is turning out to be a better fighter than a lot of people predicted, including myself, he looked very flat early on, was not a good performance. He still could have got the nod, and that was certainly what it was, but it was just an ugly, ugly fight. Against De Lima, he was backing up early in that fight, and eventually got the submission in the second round, but against De Lima, had him on his back foot and was really pressuring him. I think OSP, he either has to land a lot of takedowns or not give up any takedowns. That's the two keys: land a lot of takedowns or not give up any takedowns. Maybe the combination of the both. He usually lands 1 to 2 takedowns in victory, and that is, a recipe, I think, for success here. I think Okami's going to struggle with the physicality and size of Ovince St. Preux, who's a very big, strong, light heavyweight. We could see Okami try and drag this fight into the later rounds. I'm pretty sure it's still a 5-round fight. I haven't heard anything to the contrary. If Okami can get this fight into rounds 3, 4, and 5, he certainly could take it over. But at the same time, short notice. He's prepping for a fight, but still, how is that going to affect him? How is it going to affect him carrying around that extra weight that he would normally, not have quite as much of fighting at 185 pounds or fighting at 170 pounds? I think we're going to see OSP either use a combination of either clinch and takedown attacks. I think that's where his best money is. He could land something significant at range. He has the big reach. He's got that big power if he can connect. And as I said, Okami's knockout numbers are piling up. I think we're going to see OSP beat up Okami, land something significant, maybe Tim Boach style in the clinch, maybe from top position, ground and pound. Or a submission could be in the works as well. But my prediction is Ovince St. Preux to defeat Yushin Okami by knockout. So those are my 6 main card predictions for UFC Fight Night 117. After this, we get a bit of a break, and we inch ever closer to those big pay-per-views that are on the horizon, including UFC 217 I can't wait for. All of my preliminary picks for this Fight Night card will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. My bet packs will be posted as well. I'm trying my best to make sure I get them posted a little bit earlier. Again, I'm trying to get things organized so I can get things out as quickly as possible. As you can tell by, this will be released on Wednesday morning. You can see how much time it takes me to get where I want to go as far as getting predictions out. Either way, I keep clicking forward. I keep moving forward. I'm still in search of win number 300 when it comes to a calendar year. I don't know if I'm going to get there. What am I sitting at currently? I should just do a little update that way. I'm currently sitting at, of course, the internet's always slow and you need to be fast, 191 wins. My career best in 2014, 299 wins. So 191 wins. We still have September. We got 2 cards in September, or 1 card left in September. And actually, no, I'm sitting at 197 wins because I haven't added my last wins onto the record either. So I got to do that. 3 cards in October, and I haven't looked at November, December yet. It's going to be a push. We'll see what it is. I got to really put a run together here if I'm going to get there. But if I don't, we'll just try again next year. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and I always appreciate it when you listen, every one of you. Some people certainly more particular than others. But take care, guys, and we'll talk to you soon.